Welcome. In an earlier video, I addressed how to read and annotate an academic paper. In this video, I'd like to pick up where I left off and address how to find additional information about the topics of interest that I observed while reading that paper. Here I have returned to the PDF file that I used in my earlier demonstration. I'd like you to look past the topics that are addressed in this paper and observe, instead of the specific arguments that the authors have made, observe how I use the way the authors have noted their sources. And then I'm going to use those sources to find additional information about the topics that I've already annotated and identified as of interest to my current research project. I've zoomed in on the PDF file, so you might be able to read it on your screen. And I'm going to scroll down into the introduction section, where I have identified material in this paper that is of interest to me. So I'm going to point here in the second paragraph. The social Internet of Things, known as SIOT, is based on IoT and integrated into the design of Internet of Things through the principles of social networks. SIOT, through human to human, human to thing, and thing to thing, can provide better human-based social network services with social relationships and functions. Now, the little bit of stilted syntax here in this sentence notwithstanding, the authors are attempting to make a point that there are multiple ways in which social interactions may take place in the Internet of Things environment. And they've cited two sources. Now, this is not cited in APA style, but it is cited in a different common academic style. So if I were to click, both of these are hyperlinks in my document. If I were to click on the first one, it takes me to the references list at the end of this PDF file. And here I can see that item 1 is by Li, and Zhao, The Internet of Things, a survey published in Information Systems Frontiers, Volume 17, Issue 2, written in 2015, pages 243 to 259. Now, because I identified information in this article that I have in front of me, and the authors of this article are citing Li, and Zhao, it might be useful to me to read Li, and Zhao's article. Now I'm going to go through the process that I use to acquire a copy of Li, and Zhao's article. One way, because there are hyperlinks built into this PDF file, is to simply click the hyperlink and let's see where it takes me. The hyperlink referred me to a link on Springer.com, Springer link being a common repository of expert information. I can see the abstract. Now I can even see the references that were included in the Li, and Zhao's article. but I can't get easy access to the full document. For this, I can either buy it for $39.95 US, or I can attempt to access a copy of this paper through my institution, my university. Now, rather than clicking this link, I'm going to show you another way that may work even if you're attempting to access the document from an institution that does not have a Springer Link subscription. Here, I'm on the landing page of my university library's digital search interface. In an earlier video, I demonstrated how to use this general search function to find information. But now I wish to do a more precise search. So rather than typing the title of the article I seek here, searching for title, I'm instead going to enter the advanced search function. That will allow me to search for both the specific title and the author Lee at the same time. So I'll search for the title of the article. I'll put it in double quotation marks to indicate that I'm looking for this specific phrase, not just one or more of the words, but I want all these words in this order. Within the title field, and the name Lee within the author field. When I execute this search, I see that here the fifth item down the list is the article that I'm looking for, and it is by the same authors in the same journal and the same year of publication and the same page range. So this is the article that had been referenced in the PDF file that I had been annotating. From here, I can see the bibliographic information. I have access to a PDF copy of this original document. So I'm going to save this bibliographic information and a copy of the PDF file into my Zotero database. Then I'm going back to the PDF file that I was annotating. So back in the original PDF file that I was annotating, I see that this information about social Internet of Things included a reference entry to both item 1 and item 2. Item 1 was the article that I just went to the library, acquired, and put in my Zotero database. Now I'm going to look at the second item. Pipeline-assisted neural networks model for data-to-text generation. Great. Okay. So I'm going to copy some of this information, and I will meet you in a moment back in my university's library's database. So here in the university library's database, I've copied the title of the second cited item from my original PDF file, and I've retyped the first author's surname. I put the title within double quotation marks to ensure that my search executes as a phrase, not just as individual words. And I'll search for the title within the title field and the first author's surname within the author field. I'll execute the search and see what I find. Okay, two entries in my library are displayed. The first one gives me ready access to the PDF. The second item gives me the option to go to the Science Direct website to acquire the article. Both of these are references to the same article. So I'll click the first one. I have access to the PDF file. I see the bibliographic information here on the screen. I'm now going to save this information and a copy of the PDF into Zotero. And in a moment, I'll meet you in my Zotero database. Here in my Zotero database, I have an entry for the second paper that began with the word pan. I have the bibliographic information necessary to generate an APA-style citation and reference if I were to use data from this paper in a paper that I write. I also have a copy of the PDF file that's associated. Here is the first citation from the paper I was annotating. I have the bibliographic information that I need, and I have a PDF copy of the Internet of Things, a survey article. Now this is important. I started by annotating a paper. In annotating this paper, I identified information that was useful to me. I then looked at the items that were cited in support of that interesting information and acquired copies of those cited sources, placing them in my Zotero database so that I could read them at my leisure. So I took an article that had information that was of interest to me, identified that interesting information using highlighting. I then found the sources from which that information had originally come by looking in the references list, using the data from the references list to conduct a search in my university library, or I could have used Google Scholar, and now I've got the original sources of the data that allowed the authors that I had been reading to make the claims that they made. It's as if I'm following breadcrumbs backward through the data trail. The two examples that I offered in this video are just a quick introduction to the research process that I use when seeking the best quality information. I cautioned in an earlier video that research is not a simple process that can be conducted in a very quick manner. Researching topics for academic work requires careful consideration of the source of data that are employed in the arguments that authors make. Meaning, why did the authors make the arguments that they did? On whose work did they base their arguments? And I'm not one to take information and trust it prima facie. Rather, I want to see the sources from which the data were originally acquired to be used in the arguments that are before me, and then from there I can judge the quality of the arguments and then learn from those arguments, using them to form my own and write my own papers. It's honestly, it's a time-consuming process, and it requires a fair amount of concentration, and I have to do it either early in the morning or late in the evening when I'm not likely to be disturbed. My days tend to get disrupted both by having classes to teach and answering phone calls and email messages. So for me, research is a process that I reserve to those times of the day when I'm least likely to be interrupted. I hope you found my search description useful, and I really want you to find value in the reference lists that the authors present in the papers that you're reading, because those references lists are not there just to demonstrate academic honesty. They're there to direct the reader of a paper to finding the sources of the data that had been used in the arguments presented in the paper. So it's more clues to future researchers as to how they can follow backward through the data chain and get to the best quality information. In any regard, I wish you a lot of fun as you conduct your research, and very happy academic writing.